morning, Ray. How you doing,
Good
man?
morning, my brother. Good, man. Good. I'm
Good, good.
excited.
Yeah, man, you got me up early this morning, man.
That's right.
Feels like my old Sunday school days.
This is
So,
what this is.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, good morning to you, sir, and good morning to everybody that's tuning in. I just don't think you can quite understand the excitement that Ray and I possess, and how much we've thought about this and are looking so forward to taking you on this journey with us. Um, as many of you who have watched some of the videos where we have been working with the ethics of the fathers, we will continue to work with that. That's not something that's been put on hold. It's just something that's still there, but we're adding an additional piece of content to hopefully excite you and to get you motivated about understanding Jesus and the true historical Jesus. This is going to be a journey, and I think Ray will agree with me. This is going to be a journey that's going to be explosive at sometimes. It's going to, if you've been involved, and I want to put this preference up front again. I tried to say this in the other series while we were working through it. This by no means is in any way bashing or downgrading the church philosophy. The church does a lot of great things, and I don't have a problem with a lot of its philosophy. But when it comes to the theology in the church today, and through the past hundreds of years that have been built on prior to that, it has gotten away from the truth. It has gotten away from the truth basically because of interpretation, translations, and just specific lenses. And so what Ray and I are hoping to do with this study of the Gospel of Matthew is we want to go back to the historical picture. And to do that, it's going to allow you're going to hear some things that we talk about that I hope that really draws questions out of you. And Ray mentioned this earlier before we went live, is that our prayer is we will add a lot of resources to the comment section as we continue through this. Those resources, we want you to do your homework. Being a student of Scripture is not easy. It was never intended to be easy for those of us that are outside of Israel, outside of the chosen. And so for those of us that don't have that understanding of the culture, the context, the people, the inside discussions that we talk about, the inside discussions amongst Jesus and his disciples and Paul and the people of Scripture, if you don't have or begin to develop a clear picture of that, Jesus can almost become anybody you want him to be. And we see evidence of that today. All you have to do is turn a television on, go to a stadium, and you can listen to some of the popular speakers today, and to try to grapple with them and understand where they're coming theologically wise is difficult. So this particular study we're going to take a trip back in time. We're going to take a trip back in translations. We're going to take a trip back into understandings that is going to unfold a brand new picture for you. And it's going to be disturbing. It's going to be encouraging. It's going to be enlightening. But it's also, there are going to be moments where you're going to have to really do a gut check. You're going to have to think about things that you have thought about in whether it be Sunday school, church, Bible studies, whatever. You're going to have to wrestle with some things because, again, you need to understand the study of Scripture is one of the greatest forms of worship to God Almighty that we can participate in. Okay,
Amen.
And with that, it's very difficult. It's not like the form of worship where you're singing verses over and over again, or you're singing hymns or whatever. The study of Scripture was meant to be something that ingrains into your heart and becomes a part of your DNA. So our prayer is, again, as we move along with this, that you load us up with questions, that you wrestle with it, because this is what the great sages did. This is what Jesus did. This is what, and we'll talk a lot about this as we move along through the study, just exactly what went on in the life of Jesus. And today, and let me say this also too up front, we had talked about doing a live Facebook follow-up to this. I'm actually leaving tomorrow morning early to go out of town for the week, and I'll be out of town until probably late Friday night. I will discuss with Ray later if it's possible that we can pull this off maybe next Saturday at some point. But we will let you know that we will stay on schedule as best as possible for the Sunday study like this. But if there's any change to the schedule or whatnot, we will let you guys know. And I would encourage you to have a piece of paper, a pen. I would encourage you, we're going to do our very best to put our resources in the comment sections. So there'll be a lot of scanning of material that we'll try our best to let you see where our resources are coming from and study those resources. Take some time, take some quiet time with them, and then compare them, add them up to other resources that you have so that you can balance this out and get a clear picture of what's been presented before and what's being presented now, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the introduction. And one last thing too, Ray had mentioned earlier, we thought we could cover the whole first chapter of Matthew going into today's study, but that is absolutely impossible. There's no way unless we're going to sit here for about 7 or 8 hours. And I don't know if I have that much space on my hard drive. So as we move through today, the sections that we're going to, the piece that we're going to cover today, we'll cover today, but we're definitely, we're going to be in chapter 1 here for a couple of days. So hang with us as we go through that. I'm going to start out with an introduction to the book of Matthew, and it's going to come from a really, really, really cool written commentary and gospels. This was written by a Christian, Franz Delitzsch, and Franz Delitzsch, he, well, let me just read about him. It'll make it easier than me trying to think about it. But this translation is based upon the pioneering work of the great 19th century Christian scholar Franz Delitzsch. He collaborated for 40 years with Messianic Jew teachers and rabbis to reconstruct the New Testament's original voice. His Hebrew translation of the original Greek text does not undermine their authority or composition, but we believe that he accomplished his goal of restoring the Hebrew voice in a beautiful and authentic manner. Delitzsch himself states, "We have cause to say that our new translation has contributed somewhat to bring the New Testament nearer to the Jews as a prominent work of their literature. The New Testament is the highest work that the Jewish genius has produced." That's just a little bit about him. And then what I'm going to do now, Ray, is I'm going to go ahead and read the introduction out of this. And this is really a cool resource. And we'll put this down there with it too, because, or in the comment section, if you have an opportunity to get a copy of this, it does a great job with the Gospels themselves. So here's the introduction. Matthew was a tax collector sitting in the customs house when Yeshua called him to follow him as his disciple. That's from Matthew 9:9. The Talmud, Sanhedrin, Matthew's name is Mattiyahu, okay, is abbreviated as Mattai. So when you hear me say Mattai, that is Matthew, okay? In the manner of the Hebrew Aramaic language of those days, such as Shammai, Sakai, and Yanai, and the like. Mattai wrote his book according to the church fathers Papias, Clements of Alexander, and many others, in the Hebrew tongue mixed with Aramaic, which was customary then among the Jews, and the book was later translated into Greek. In some places, the proper understanding of the passage can be better understood after reconstructing the original Semitic phrasing. That's important to understand because, number one, you've heard us say this 100 times before, and it's what it is. Jesus was Jewish.
Right.
Jesus understood the people that he dealt with, the people that he spoke with, the people he lived among, the people that he taught to, the people that he went to temple with. They were Jews, okay? And so that culture was ingrained in his head. Mattai was a great scholar, and even to this day, the Gentile readers have found many difficulties in his words and do not know how to resolve these correctly, since they are unfamiliar with Jewish scholarships. Before I finish on with that was a problem that I had early on in reading some of the Gospels. Was there were gray areas that just didn't add up to what I was being told, or didn't add up to an English translation. It was there, it was spoken, but the pieces didn't fit together like a really cohesive piece that belonged in a puzzle, okay? Many of their commentaries are based on the ideas and interpretations of scriptures that were invented by Gentiles. Now hear this. These commentaries that you see a lot of times in the Christian bookstores or in seminaries or on the bookshelves of pastors and stuff like that, they were invented by Gentiles, and these were long after the death of Jesus. Okay, and so according to Papias, Mattai called his book the Sayings of Yeshua. While it is true that Mattai's book contains both sayings of Yeshua and the stories of his deeds, the Hebrew word for sayings, devarai, includes both words and deeds, unlike the Greek word, okay? Apparently, sometime later, the name was changed when they began to call the book the Gospel of Matthew. Okay, and it's important that you understand that we're talking in the original language. Both the words and deeds were together. They were cohesive together. They were not separated, all right? Yep. The original title makes sense because Mattai in his book was mostly concerned about the teachings or the Torah of Yeshua. And you need to understand that, and you've heard Ray speak about this before, the teachings of Jesus, Yeshua, these were from the Torah. They weren't from a New Testament. The New Testament wasn't there. They weren't from any other writings. They weren't there. They were what he knew, only what he knew, the Torah, okay? So to dismiss the Torah, you're really taking a hammer and hitting yourself in the toe because it just doesn't make any sense at all. Mattai was not as meticulous with the narratives of Yeshua as Luke was, who wrote at the beginning of his book, I too thought it good to collect an account of the deeds, okay? Unlike Mark and Luke, who were more concerned with relating Yeshua's deeds, Mattai abbreviated the narrative, but he was meticulous with the sayings of Jesus, or Yeshua.
Teaching. Yeah.
This is because Mattai wrote his book in Hebrew for Jews, okay? He didn't write the book of Matthew for Christians in 2020. He didn't write the book of Matthew for Christians who came along later on in several hundred years after the fact. At the time that Matthew wrote this book, he was writing for the Jews, okay? This is because Mattai wrote his book in Hebrew for the Jews who knew the terminology of the sages of Israel. This is important that you understand. This is where you get your meat of understanding from the sages of the Torah. These were the scholars, okay? These were not the scholars that came along 300 years ago or 400 years ago or 500 years ago. These are the scholars that knew the language, knew the culture, and knew the people. But Mark and Luke's Luke wrote their books for Gentiles to understand. Mattai was among the Jews who were zealous for the Torah, who are mentioned in Acts 21:20. This helps us to understand the statement of Clement of Alexander that Mattai was one of the Nazarites who never ate meat. And Ray will touch on this in his travels among the Gentiles. He did not want to have to refuse the food of Gentiles, so he ate no meat at all. Those who claim that Mattai wrote his book after the year 40 CE appear to be correct, because that is when Yaakov, the brother of John, was killed by Hortus Agrippus in Acts 12. And after that, Mattai left Israel. Irenaeus states that he wrote his book while Petros, which is Peter, and Paul were preaching the Gospels in Rome. Eusebius states that Mattai handed an organized gospel. He literally handed an organized gospel over to his Jewish friends who believed in the Mashiach, who believed in the Messiah, okay? When he was about to leave the land of Israel. In the opinion of many, he traveled to Ethiopia and proclaimed the gospel there. So there's a lot right there in that introduction, in that historical introduction, that begins to shake up a little bit of the narrative about Matthew and his writings as we begin today to look at something that a lot of people find boring and have skipped over when they start with the book of Matthew. That is the importance of the genealogy and what that does. And so, Ray, I think I have just spoke for a little bit. So, my man, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll get started with your side.
Appreciate it, man, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. There's a lot there to chew on. We need to remember and focus on the fact that there's a lot that the church fathers. There's a lot of history there that that one should delve in and be educated in, to know what were their thoughts in the very beginning of the inception of the church, which came way after Jesus and his Jewish disciples. I should add, maybe 200 to 300 years after. But these words, after the destruction of the temple in the 770 Common Era, the apostles and their disciples, began to be spread in the exile, just like all the Jewish community were too. And as they began to be spread in the exile, this message began to be spread to the nations too. When I say to the nations, I mean to non-Jews. And so we have to remember that, the faith, the background, for the most part at that time, that the nations were entrenched in idolatry, in pagan and Greek mythology, and this was their bread and butter. They were not initiated into the faith of Israel. They did not know about the God of Israel, so this was very difficult for them, and it was a very difficult task for Paul and any who were part of his group. Certainly, he had his hands tied, and it was a very, very difficult situation that he found himself in, trying to teach these non-Jews. But the faith and the message spread like wildfire, as we know. And so here we are today. We're going to be in Matthew 1:1, and before I'm going to read the genealogy itself very quickly, but I wanted to say that the genealogy is very important, and you could see that Matthew, the author of Matthew, understood how important the genealogy is. A lot of times, Christians and people from among Christianity will really skip over this. It's just a list of names. It doesn't really mean much, but it actually means everything, and that's why Matthew brought it to the forefront. This is the first thing he did. Luke as well, because one cannot be the Messiah. Okay, one cannot be the Messiah if he's not a descendant of King David. And there's got to be some type of way that you're able to prove this. Many of the great sages and rabbis of Israel who also trace their lineage to King David can do this even till this very day. Um, Rashi, the great commentator and expositor of the Torah, Rashi, and the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, uh, the Rebbe of Lubavitch. If you see any Chabad houses around your city, the Rabbi of Lubavitch, Rabbi Schneerson, he's also a descendant of King David, and they have a genealogy just like we find here. That they're able to trace these things, okay, uh, all the way back to King David. And so here we are, and I wanted to know, if you go on my Facebook page, I quoted a source yesterday from the Talmud, Yomah 22b, I think it is, and there the sages explain that the lineage of the Messiah, who the Messiah will be, the lineage of King David. In their own words, they say it's filled with reptiles or with bone or skeletons in the closet, to put it in better terms, meaning that the genealogies had all these secrets and all these scandals. Ruth and Rahab, who's a harlot, is part of the messianic line. She's mentioned, okay?
Yes.
Lot's wives are within the messianic line. King David, okay? I'll just say a few words about King David. Jesse, his father, because his grandmother is Ruth, right? She is a Moabitess, and she was a convert. It is said in the Torah that no Moabite can come into the people of Israel, right? The sages discussed this, and it ended up being that no male from among the Moabites can be a convert, but the females could. This is how Ruth gets in, okay? And so Ruth marries Boaz, and from Boaz, right, comes Jesse, and Jesse is the father of King David, right? Now, there's a point that the sages, they're discussing about Jesse's life, and they explain that that he came to a part in his life where he was devastated. He really didn't believe there was, you're not really a Jew, you're not really, from the Israelite people, because your mother is Ruth and this, that, and the other. And so he went to divorce his wife, Nitzavet, who's a Jewess, because he didn't want his child to grow up with this same situation that he grew up with.
Right.
Okay, it was very painful to him. Jesse is known among Israel and among Jewish tradition as a very righteous man, and so he didn't want that to happen. So he was going to divorce his wife, and he was going to marry her servant, who was a non-Jew. And when it was getting ready to happen, that he was going to consummate his marriage with this non-Jewish woman, she was Nitzavet, her servant. So she went and told her master, Nitzavet, what was getting ready to happen, and they switched. And so that night, Jesse slept with his own wife, and she became pregnant. Okay? When King David is born, it happens that King David is born, and he has red hair, and he looks a bit different than his brothers. Okay? And so they automatically, scandal rises, because Jesse didn't sleep with her, right? Even Jesse was like, "What happened here?" And there was all kinds of things being said among the community that she fooled around on Jesse and this, that, and the other. And so you could even hear it in the words of King David in the Psalms. He says, "I am a stranger to my brothers."
Yes.
He says also, "In sin did my mother bore me."
Yes.
Right? He says things like this. This is the background to that psalm, through the psychological and emotional pain that King David was born and raised in, almost so much that he might have almost even believed that himself, that something happened there, right?
Yes.
So we could see that there's a scandal in the genealogy. there's this, and you could also see it in the life of Jesus, right? It's even said in the gospel, I want to say of John, he says, he's having a religious discussion with some of the leaders, and he says, aren't we right to say that you're a Samaritan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was believed, because of the scandal of the supposed virgin birth, right?
Yes.
That Mary might have slept around. I mean, Joseph had to be told by an angel, take Mary, this woman, as your wife, because what is conceived in her is of God, right?
Yes.
And so, I mean, Joseph ben Yaakov, that is his name. Joseph, the son of Jacob, his father, was a righteous man himself. The highest praise that you can get among the Jewish people is that of a tzaddik, and that's what Joseph was. And so you see King David, he has all these skeletons in his closet. And finally, when God tells Samuel the prophet to anoint the king, he comes to Jesse's house to anoint one of his sons, and all his sons are presented to Samuel, and one by one pass. And every time one passes, God tells Samuel, this is not the one. I mean, he has all the qualifications. I mean, he's one of the sons of Jesse. He's illustrious scholar, a leader among the people, etc., etc. And on every one, God tells him, this is not the one. And he goes through all of Jesse's sons, and he's not here. I mean, Samuel's looking around like, I mean, did they make a mistake on the compass? You know, what's going on here? And so he asks Jesse, hey, is these all your sons? And Jesse was like, yeah, these are all my sons. Oh, you know, the little one, he's out there taking care of the sheep. So much so that he wasn't even invited to this. It was a big deal for the prophet of Israel to come to your home. Yeah. He wasn't even invited to this feast. You know, they were eating and all this. The little one is out there doing the work. He's shepherding the sheep. And so Samuel says, please call him. You know, I can't leave, or, you know, this cannot be consummated until you call your other son. They go and they fetch David. And when David walks in, Samuel looks at him, and God tells him, arise, Samuel, and anoint him, for this is my anointed. My anointed, that word means this is my Mashiach, this is my Messiah. God tells Samuel, yeah. and they anoint David. Okay, he is anointed as king at that moment. He doesn't raise to the throne for much time later. Okay, King Saul is still the actual king. But I just wanted to say that so you could understand that word David was accustomed to. He understood what it means to be called a bastard. Jesus is called a bastard. I mean, that term is used even till this day. Many think that Jesus is a mamzer, a bastard, because that Joseph is not his real father. Mm-hmm. But those closest to Jesus, his family, okay, his mother, his father, his brother, his brothers, his sisters, they knew, okay?
Yes.
His apostles, they understood a very key and simple fact, that if you are not a descendant of David through Solomon, you cannot trace your line back to him. You cannot be the Messiah. You cannot be the Christ. That's what the word Christ means, Messiah. You cannot be the Christ. It's over. I mean, you might as well close the New Testament, because if Jesus is not from the line of David, cannot be the Messiah. Point blank, period. This is Jewish law. This is the law. You can't change this. This is according to the law of God. Now, there's plenty of prophecies that God tells David, his house, Solomon, his house, that their line, the kings will not stop being, they will not never have a time period. I mean, they will not ever have someone who actually sits on the throne, and that the descendant of King David will sit on the throne forever. This is the Messiah. This is interpreted as the Messiah, right?
Yes.
Now, before I say the next important things that we're going to talk about, which is the seed of David, the line of David, how you're descended from him. This is a very important key. We're going to get to it now. Before we do that, I want to read real quick Matthew 1, the genealogy. I want to read it so you can see how it starts, right? And we can get this in our minds that this is extremely important. This is like Dan Brown, you know, the Da Vinci Code. This is the Holy Grail right here.
Right. As you get ready to do this, as you take a breath to read this, I'm going to bring it into real simple terms, okay? You have a birth certificate, okay? That birth certificate tells you where you came from, your direct descendants of where you came from.
Exactly.
Nowadays, you have something called Ancestry.com, okay? And
Yeah.
you can take your lineage as far back as they can trace it, okay? This genealogy is really the very first version, the 1.0 version of Ancestry.com, man.
That's
Okay?
right.
And
That's right.
it's important because, like you said, the disciples, they would not have been called to walk with him if they did not understand the inner conversation, the
Exactly.
lineage, and so forth, okay? So without a birth certificate, and even without Ancestry.com, those disciples, they understood, and the people around Jesus understood the importance of what you're about to read, and how that lines him up as he began to prove to people just who he is. So go ahead, man.
Yeah. I mean, it must be stressed that a lot of us don't understand how this works, but in those days, especially in the Jewish community, amongst the Jewish people, oral tradition is extremely strong. I mean, they have a very good recollection as it is passed down from father to son and in the family. These genealogies, even the scriptures themselves, were memorized and passed down. They were taught via memorization because at that time they didn't have a Bible. There were no Bibles.
That's
They
right.
had to go to the synagogue to hear the Bible being read by the either the priests or by the Pharisees, the teachers of the law. At that time, they would read it and they would memorize it. I mean, and they were passed down through this, and they may have had little sections of the Torah that they took home, but a lot of even today, a lot of rabbis can quote to you the
Yes.
first 5 books of Moses by
Yes.
memory,
Yes.
entire chapters and entire verses,
Yes.
on and on and on and on. They could do it via memory because this has been their diet since birth.
Yes.
Okay. Not only this, these genealogies at that time in the first century, they were kept in the records in the temple. If somebody needed to know anything or needed a copy of something, they would go to the temple and they would grab this and use it. They would have it in a scroll. Furthermore, this stuff was so important to those of the Davidic line that they also knew it by memory and passed down to their children orally.
Yes.
Hey, your father was so and 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 so all the way back. They would do it just like that to the
Right.
children, so the children would memorize this stuff.
Right. And that genealogy, a lot of times, is what helped with the oral tradition, the passing of it, because as you would look at specific people through the timeline,
That was a history.
there was a history to that. Exactly. And that's why you can't dismiss the oral tradition, because that is the foundation by which we have this.
The New Testament, of course. Of
Exactly.
course.
Go ahead,
Of
my
course.
friend.
All right, here we go. This is the book of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 1. Listen to how it starts, guys. It says, an account of the Toledot. Toledot is genealogy, all right? An account of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, son of David, the son of Abraham, because the promises were given to Abraham and his descendants. And David is a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right?
Yes.
But right there off the back, they're going to establish that Jesus comes from the Davidic line. Verse 2, really quick. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was the father of Jacob. These are the patriarchs. And Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. And his brothers, which are the 12 tribes of Israel, of Judah, right? And his brothers. And Judah the father of Perez and Zerah and by Tamar. And Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Aram. And Aram the father of Aminadab, and Aminadab the father of Nashon. And Nashon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab. And Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth. Here we are. And Obed the father of Jesse. And Jesse the father of King David. All right.
Ah, yes.
And David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. Okay. Here are those reptiles and these skeletons in the closet.
Yes.
They're everywhere. So it
Yes.
says, and David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah, and Solomon the father of Rehoboam, and Rehoboam the father of Abijah, and Abijah the father of Asaph, and Asaph the father of Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat the father of Joram, and Joram the father of Uzziah, and Uzziah the father of Jotham, and Jotham the father of Ahaz, and Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, and Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, and Manasseh the father of Amos, and Amos the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah, and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon.
Amen.
Okay, that was the exile during Jeremiah's time. Okay,
Yes.
and after the deportation, the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel, and Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel the father of Abiud, and Abiud the father of Eliakim, Eliakim the father of Azor, and Azor the father of Zadok, and Zadok the father of Achim, and Achim the father of Eliud, and Eliud the father of Eliezer, and Eliezer the father of Matan. And here we are.
Yes.
And Matan the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Miriam, of whom Jesus was born, who is called the Messiah.
Amen.
All right, there it is. That is the entire genealogy, okay? And now we wanted to get to a crux in this study, in this week's study, and that is the Messiah has to be a descendant of David. There is a great rabbi who is an authority amongst Judaism. He is called Moses Maimonides, okay? He's extremely great. We can't say enough about him. He's known by the abbreviation of the Rambam, okay? Maimonides. And so, in one of his grand opus, his work, Mishnah Torah, okay, which is basically like a second Torah, it's all about Jewish law, okay? How to keep the law, how to keep the Torah, the commandments, and all that stuff. There's a section of it that's called the Laws of Kings. And in the Laws of Kings, Maimonides actually discusses the qualifications for someone who comes in and wants to be the Messiah. Remember, guys, that the Messiah, this term, doesn't mean that this individual is Superman who comes from the clouds, okay? It does not mean that he is God. No, the Messiah must be a real human being that can trace his lineage to King David. Okay. Now here I'm about to throw the wrench. At you guys. All right. According to even the Gospels, especially in who has made this situation big is Christianity, the virgin birth. Jesus is the real son of Miriam, but not of Joseph. Joseph is his adopted father, right? But not his real father. There's a big problem with that, guys, okay? A huge problem. Because tribal affiliation, okay, the way that the tribal lineage was passed on to you came via the paternal line, okay? Listen carefully, through the father only. So this situation from the church fathers who were not very educated in Judaism and in Jewish law, they were unaware of this simple fact that tribal affiliation comes through the father, only through the father. All the lines that we just read there and all genealogies is father for father, father for father, father for father. Okay, same thing with the priests, the Levites. It's all via the father. You cannot be the Messiah, who is a real human being, okay, if you cannot trace this through your paternal line. So here it is. If Joseph is not the father, his DNA is not in Jesus, it's over. We have disqualified Jesus of Nazareth as a messianic candidate because of our theology, because of our dogmas, because of our doctrine. Okay?
Mhm.
It wasn't so for the first Jewish apostles or their disciples. How do I know this? Because the church fathers, once again, we got to give them some, we got to give them, we got to give them some props for this, okay?
Yeah.
Like Eusebius and Uranius, there's a work among the church fathers called Against Heresies. And in this work, they detail all the heretical groups that were out there. And one of the ones that they hated the most were the Jewish disciples of Jesus. I mean, they were so Jewish, so Jewish. How Jewish were they? They were so Jewish that they kept all the Torah, they kept all the laws.
Yeah.
They prayed during their time, it was already the time of the exile. They prayed facing Jerusalem, where the temple was at. They were so pious for
Yeah.
they had, like Jesus, they had zeal in their hearts for the house of God, right? They prayed facing Jerusalem. They ate kosher. I mean, that gets in the way of the non-Jews eating their pork. They didn't like that, okay? So they ate kosher. You know, they studied the Torah extensively. They kept all Jewish laws. They kept all the holy days, Passover, Shavuot, everything. They kept everything. And so they were extremely Jewish. And so they had to be amongst these groups that they were detailing that were the heretics. These Jewish disciples were known to the church fathers as the first group that we're going to talk about is the Ebionites, the Evyonim, which is translated as the poor ones. As Jesus taught in Matthew, blessed are the poor in spirit. Okay? This type of tradition and understanding and teaching was passed through his disciples. And this group was known even amongst Jesus' day as the Evyonim, the Ebionites. Okay? They were very, very zealous for the law. And the Evyonim, they only had this copy, according to the church fathers, they only had this copy of the Hebrew Matthew, only in Hebrew.
Yes.
Okay, which was circulated in them. They didn't have any other of the books that we have in the New Testament today. They only had this and another gospel called the Gospel of the Hebrews, which was just a compilation, a recording of the teachings, only the teachings of Jesus. It didn't really have a lot of the stories, etc. It just had all his teachings. There was another group as well who were called the Nazarenes. The Nazarenes actually had the entirety of the New Testament as we have it today, okay? But they also were amongst these groups of heretics because the same thing. They believed that Jesus was only a man, just like the Evyonim. They rejected any notion, and these are the closest connection that we have to the apostles. They rejected any notion of a God-man, that Jesus, there was a Trinity or anything like that. They were strict monotheists, just like the Jews today, okay? They kept the Jewish law, they kept the commandments, the holy days, they kosher, etc. The Nazarenes were the same way. The only thing is that they had all the books of the New Testament that we have today. The Evyonim rejected the idea of any understanding of a virgin birth. The Nazarenes, on the other hand, listen, the Evyonim rejected it. They understood that if you did that, you cut him off if Joseph is not his father. The Nazarenes, on the other hand, they accepted the allegorical or mythic interpretation, whatever, miracle, we can even call it a miracle, right, of the virgin birth. But they stressed, the church fathers even put this, they stressed that the Nazarenes, though they believed in the virgin birth, they understood that through a miracle, the seed of Joseph wasn't Jesus. Why did they understand this? And we'll go back to the importance of what we're talking about. If Joseph, the genealogies, both of them, guys, both of the genealogies they're not how the church fathers say or Christianity says one of them is Miriam's and one of them is Joseph. No. Both of them are Joseph's genealogy. Both of them. If Jesus is not a real descendant, if through his blood does not run the blood of Joseph, it's over. Jesus cannot be the Messiah. Okay?
And Ray, I'll give you a second to get your breath. It all hinges on that word Messiah.
Yes.
Okay? And even in the Christian world, now I don't hear it as much in in messages and preaching or whatever you want to call it today, I don't hear the title Messiah as much as I did earlier back in the 80s and the 90s and so forth. But to use that word, it's used a lot of times as
Last name.
a title, right, with no context to it. I mean, you title him the Messiah, Jesus the Messiah, right, the last name, without a context to it. And with that, I mean, you could replace it with King, Jesus the King, but King of whom? It's not King of Atlanta, Georgia, or, you know, who was he the king of, and who will he be the king of, the Messiah of, when
The
he
Jews.
sits at the world to come? And so for Christians, you know, understanding our place in this whole olive tree, in this whole effort, we have to understand the basics, and we have to understand that Jesus really is the Messiah. He is our
And
master.
what that meant. I mean, and what that meant, the Messiah, like you just
Exactly,
said.
exactly,
People
exactly.
say all Christians say all the time, Jesus Christ, as if Christ was his last name and Miriam and Joseph's last name is Joseph Christ or Miriam Christ. No, 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 no.
Right, right, right.
Christ is a title, which means the Messiah, which means the Mashiach in Hebrew. It means to be anointed.
Yes,
Anointed for what? To be anointed the King of Israel.
yes,
Okay? So his disciples, his apostles, Jesus never actually sat on the throne in Israel because at that time the Romans were in control. And this is the very reason why he was killed. He
yes,
was killed for insurrection, for having disciples and a party, a group following him who believed that this man could possibly be the king of Israel. And it was so simple that if he wasn't of the royal line, anyone could go to the temple courts, or anyone, because it was through the community, they understood, oh, dude, you're not a descendant of David. We know this. We know your family.
yes,
But
yes,
it's not like that. In the Gospels themselves, when the angel appears to Joseph, he is called what, Mitch? He's called Son of David.
yes,
That that
yes,
phrase in itself may
yes.
slip by other minds, but to a Jewish mind, Son of David is a term that means you're a descendant of the king. You're a
It,
descendant of David
it was the
because he,
seal. It was the seal, like a king would put on a document.
Son of David,
Seal. Yes,
exactly.
yes,
So like any king after David, generations after David were called son of David because it was a religious connotation that we understood that you are from the seed of David.
yes,
So it would be correct for Joseph to be called son of David, meaning you're of the royal line, sir.
yes,
Anyone could have disproved them. You're not. This
yes,
guy is nobody. This guy's not. No, they couldn't do that because he was really of the lineage of David.
yes.
It was known. If
And,
anyone could do
and
this, go to,
no, and when we talk about Joseph, even though we talk about his youth, he was still a righteous man. It
a
talks about
tzaddik.
his
That
righteousness.
is yes,
And for
a
them to
tzaddik.
use, for scripture to use the word righteous, it goes far deeper than a lot of times what Christians would think of righteous. It has a connotation, it has this viewpoint to it, this whole umbrella that comes to it that is far greater, far
Exactly.
greater than what we
I,
think of as a person that just does good deeds or whatever. So even though he was young, scripture called him a righteous person, a righteous man, which elevates him among a lot of people at that time. And so, Joseph,
I'll tell you more. I'll tell you some more background. I mean, it flies. These details fly, right by a lot of us when we read the New Testament. But Joseph and Miriam were so pious.
yes,
Miriam as well. They were so pious that there's details in there, small details that say they would travel. It was halakhically a part of Jewish law that you had to travel in those days to the temple to observe Passover, Shavuot, okay? The three main, and Sukkot, the three main holy days that you had to make a pilgrimage. The men had to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem to celebrate these holy days there. At that time, this was done. I mean, nowadays, nobody wants to even go a couple blocks up the street to a corner store without your car. These folks would walk all the way to the temple. every year, year after year. They were so pious that they did these things. Okay,
Yes.
and it also details everything they did. They after they presented Jesus as the firstborn, as the law says. They circumcised Jesus on the 8th day, as the law says.
Yes.
Miriam gave 2 turtle doves because of her impurity. They were poor. This detail that they were poor people. Furthermore, the Gospels say that Joseph was a carpenter, okay, a nagar in Hebrew. We have understood this. Christianity has understood this, that, and he might as well been some type of builder, a carpenter that builds structures, homes, whatever. But there is a religious connotation to this word carpenter, which I'm going to blow you guys away. I have a note on this, that word carpenter is used for Torah scholars. Get this, for Torah scholars. This would make a whole lot of sense why Jesus was so pious and why the scriptures say that he grew in wisdom and understanding in the eyes of God and of men.
He grew in wisdom.
If you're God,
He
dude, you
grew.
cannot grow.
It just didn't pop.
It didn't
There
come
was a
from heaven.
growth.
It didn't fall from heaven.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Joseph was a tzaddik. First of all, it's the highest compliment that you could get in amongst the Jewish community, amongst Judaism. Okay. Yeah. And then he was a carpenter, a nagar, which means one of its main meanings, even in Talmud and according to the sages, is a Torah scholar. So Jesus is called, he has said, and that phrase is actually used in the Talmud, says, the son of the carpenter. Son of the carpenter. We know your parents.
Yes. That's crazy, man. That's crazy.
So it makes sense that there's one time when Jesus is very, very young. I think some scholars say he was around 7, 8, 9 years old. I don't know. They traveled to Jerusalem for Passover, and on their way back, they noticed, because they used to go in companies, like in groups, that, hey, where's Yeshua? Where's Jesus? And they can't find them. They go back. They had to travel all the way back to Jerusalem. I don't know how far they were. They go all the way back, and they find him.
Yeah.
Amongst the temple courts, amongst the sages of that time, the holy priest and the sages of Pharisees, whatever. The Pharisees are surrounding him, and they're asking him a bunch of Torah law questions, Jewish law questions of the Torah, and they're, and they were surprised of the answers and the questions that he was giving them. They were so shocked. They understood that he was a prodigy. This child is very, very learned.
Yes.
The Spirit of God was rolling in him, and he must have had a very, very good teacher in his father, Joseph.
Yes.
Okay, who we don't have a lot of details in the Gospels, but he had to be a super man. I mean, when at first it is told to Joseph the situation that he sees that his wife comes back and she is already showing, he's as a normal man, he's upset and he goes to put her away. But the Bible, I mean, the New Testament gives us this very, very quiet detail. It says he did it, but he did it in a quiet manner in order not to bring any condemnation on her and in order not to do anything to her. That's how righteous he was, because according to Jewish law, he was in the right to bring this scandal out, and she could be punished. She could be killed if the jurisdiction of the law, which it wasn't at that time, if the jurisdiction of the law was ruling, she could be killed for that.
Yes.
But he was so pious that he put her, like he was going to put her away in secret. Because he was a righteous man, it says, the gospel says that.
Exactly.
Then the angel has to come in a dream, and it calls him, the angels are the closest ones to God. They understood that Joseph is son of David. The genealogies are passed down through the paternal line, through the father. Only. And you cannot be adopted into the kingship. A non-Jew cannot come and say, hey, my father is so-and-so, and I am going to be king.
Right.
It's prohibited by the Bible. By the books of Moses, it's prohibited. It had to be your child. It had to be, your father was a descendant of David. If you were not that way, you cannot be adopted into the house of David.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
it's still that way today in countries that have royalty with the lineage. You know, you look at kings and queens and so forth like that. And the other thing I wanted to add to that too, Ray, is I get a lot of questions. People ask a lot of questions about why is there not details about Jesus in his early years, his childhood years in Scripture? Well, because what was put in Scripture were things that were out of the norm. Okay, they were things that you took notice of. He lived. They would not have put in Scripture the fact that his growing years he grew like a Jewish boy.
Exactly.
He did his normal days were like what you said. They were before his father. They were before, you know, he did things that, you know, and so why put that in there? Because
It was irrelevant. It was
people
irrelevant.
already knew that. They knew that people reading or you know, looking into this scripture, they would already know that's how he lived. So there's no reason to put that in there. You know, it wasn't like he spent the first 12, 13 years of his life flying around on a magic carpet, you know, out there building up you know, getting ready to market himself, as we put it in terms today, as the Messiah. No, he lived that day-to-day life of prayer, of word, of growing in front of his father's wisdom.
Doing, and most
Yes,
importantly, doing.
yes, sir.
Yeah. A lot of that stuff is irrelevant, especially to Jews, because he lived like other Jews, pious Jews.
Yes,
That worship God and did the will of God, right? I mean,
yes,
there's a lot of other oral traditions of like Moses and others, right? Who the same thing happens in these oral traditions. They give a snippet of when he was born, maybe another snippet and another point period of his childhood, and that's it. A little
yes,
detail, just like that, and they skip to his adult life.
yes,
This is how it is amongst the heroes and rabbis and rabbis of the amongst Israel. You don't get whole biographies like that, especially in ancient Judaism. In ancient Judaism, you don't have that. It's not like that. It's irrelevant. We know that pious Jews, what their life's about. I mean, Jews know that. We don't know that, but Jews know that. And so
right,
these are why these things were skipped over. He
right.
had a normal traditional upbringing like other pious Jews before him and after him.
Yes. Well, man, you I never, in all my years of working in the Christian environment or in the Christian theological environment, there was dabblings into the genealogy, but it was very quick. It was very, you were in there and you were out of there, and there was nothing that brought forth the importance of that line. And you did a really good job. And for a lot of people out there, the reason I have Ray do this is because he can roll his R's. So as we move along, as we move along in the teachings, you know what? I need you to make a notation that the man can roll his R's, and that is why I have him read a lot of this, because I just get carried away with it sometimes. So it's I'm just playing, man. But Ray, you did a great job on hitting on the
Appreciate you, man.
technology, man. And that is the root. That is the root of Jesus. That is the root of where the gospel goes. That gives the gospel of Matthew credence. That gives it the stamp. You know, the authentic. You know, the authenticity of the writing itself.
And I wanted to say this. I think I started to, and I forgot. I went into something else about Moses Maimonides, the Rambam, that he
Yes.
details in his Mishnah Torah, right? He details that the first qualification, okay, there are qualifications for a messianic candidate that we cannot even see him as a candidate if he doesn't have these certain qualifications, a potential Messiah. The very first thing that he says, folks, is that a descendant of David will arise. He says, if a descendant of King David arises, and then he goes on to detail other qualifications, which I'll put the entire source passage in the comment section. But that's the very first thing he says. I mean, we cannot get past this. We cannot even hold Jesus up as Messiah. We believe he's the Messiah or anything like that if he's not a descendant of David.
Yes.
And here we are that we have recorded in the Gospels, and two of them actually, a copy of his genealogy. I
Yes.
mean, of his descendants. They knew that this was going to be a question brought up, after they were exiled or whatever. And so it had to be there. And so they recorded it for us, which is, like I said, this is the real Holy Grail.
Yes, yes, and very well laid out, Ray. And I think that gives, I think between this and then the resources that we can give through the comment sections should give you guys a little bit to study and a little bit to think about and a little bit to maybe go and ask your pastor about. But just something to wrestle with and to to understand just. Just what puts that foundation under Jesus, but also as we go on into the book of the Gospel of Matthew, you're going to hear a lot from his teachings and a lot of what he puts into it. And it's going to be eye awakening. So I think we've hit you guys with a good bit this morning, Ray. I think you did a fantastic job. Probably one of the best I've ever heard as far as rolling out the importance of that of the genealogy and you did, I'd say probably 99% of that from up here, man. And that's beautiful, man. Beautiful. So
Appreciate
we're
it.
gonna Rain, you have anything else you want to say before we shut this session out?
Yes. So I just want to make sure that we stress that please go to the comment section and look at the other resources that we're going to share there, because I'll put down an article there that details a lot of this stuff. I'm going to share that quote by the Rambam. Mitch also has a few things that he's going to share there, and this is for people who are like Bereans, like that Acts 17:11 says that. It says that the Bereans were more noble-minded than those in Thessalonica because they searched the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. And so we all have to be this way, okay? We all have to search and do our homeworks, and it's not right, and it's not the correct thing to do that we leave this up to others. That we must be convinced for ourselves
Yes.
of what is going on. There's a lot of people around our society and our generations who they say they're a Christian or they say they're this, that, and the other, but it's only because it's a faith passed on to them through their fathers and through their grandparents and grandparents and grandparents, not because they themselves did an investigation. I was like this. I mean,
Yes.
when I would say when I was growing up, I was a Christian just because my parents were, but not because I knew anything about Christianity or because I knew anything about the Bible. I didn't know anything.
Yes.
And so there's the majority of people are walking in the same thing. They say they love God or Jesus, but their understanding and their knowledge of these things are very, very superficial.
Yes.
That's not good enough. I mean, that's not good enough at all. It's not the right thing to do to sit in the pews and just allow someone to tell you a whole bunch of things. That person could be wrong too. I mean, we have to, these things depend on what? Your souls, the destination of our souls, right? Because it's going to affect the way we conduct our lives. This is the reason why we read the scriptures and why we believe in God, in order that we can be righteous people who live a righteous life, right? We won't know how to be righteous, how to conduct ourselves, or the different type of beliefs that we have if they're not founded and grounded on truth and on facts. And so we must do this investigation. We got to search these things out. And it's very easy. Today, there is no excuse. When any one of us are put in front of the throne of God and we have to give an account of our lives, we have been placed in a period of time where there's no excuse. I mean, back in the days, you didn't have none of this stuff, this technology. Today, you can get on a computer, guys. I honestly tell you this. Yeah, there's a lot of lies and disinformation, but if you search very, very deep, you'll find the truth on the tip of your fingers.
Diligent.
Right? And if you search diligently, you search out true scholarship and get the right resource with you, which we would try to provide you with a heads up into good resources to check. You can come up on this information for yourself. All right. And
I agree, Ray. And one last thing I'll say too is, growing up in the church, I can remember that when young adults would hit that teenage mark and they would get through high school, and then they would just disappear. Okay, after high school, they would disappear from the churches. They would get into colleges. They would get into philosophy classes. They would get into comparative religion classes. And they would get into classes with real scholars. And if they weren't doing their homework, back home on their own,
They would lose. Yeah, man. They
and
lose
if
their
they
faith.
weren't doing their own homework and building that foundation and not living off of mom and dad's foundation, or not living off of that really cool youth program that sometimes was great with the music and sometimes great with the activities, but when it came to building that foundation, the moment they walked out of that house and the moment they hit that college, or the moment they have interaction with people who do have knowledge, boom, they were gone, man.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
so that's why I would stress, and I don't care what age you are, the sooner you can begin to really solidify that foundation with truth, then the quicker you are, the better off you are preparing yourself to be able to walk into the world with truth, so that when it does hit you, or when hard times hit or difficulties come across, you're not backed into a corner and you don't just give in to the next thing that passes by, man.
Signature, truth. That is the signature of God. I mean, we need to understand, why do you believe what you believe?
Yes. Yes.
Why? What are those? Why do you believe? Do you believe only because your parents? But do you know why you
Yes.
believe
Yes.
what you believe? You
Yes.
can believe anything. I
Yes.
mean, why are you not part of another religion?
Yeah.
Or why you don't believe in different things? You
Right.
have to be able to answer these questions for yourself,
Right.
because none of us know. I mean, tomorrow's not promised,
Right.
right?
Right.
And the time for doing, the time for action is now.
Right.
Now we need to prepare in this world for the next world.
Yes. Very good, Ray. Well, my brother, we're gonna close this session down. You did really well. For those of you
You too,
out
my
there,
brother. You too.
Ray and I, we pray blessings on you as you begin the start of this new week, and pray for safety, pray for your families. And Ray, I hope you have a great week coming up. I'll be in touch with you, and look forward to the next time that we get together and have an opportunity to push this even further, man. Okay.
Thank you, Mitch, man, and God bless everyone, all of our listeners. Thank you, guys. We appreciate you, and I appreciate you, Mitch, man. Many blessings.
All right, brother. Take care of yourself, man.
Yep. Yep.